I thought I'd start with a little bit of background about SoftNAS, why I started SoftNAS. I'm Rick Braddy, the founder, CEO, and CTO of SoftNAS. I'm going to go through an overview. We're going to actually get into the products, and then we'll go deeper into the tech later in the presentation with Adam. So I started SoftNAS, I like to say, as a disgruntled traditional storage customer. So after I retired from Citrix in 2007, retirement sounds like a good thing, but I guess I wasn't really ready to retire. So after about 6 months, just went back to consulting and ended up at a virtual hosted cloud desktop company in Houston. And we were VMware based, and we were moving small businesses into the cloud. It was, software with our VMware cloud. And we got paid, based on the number of users running virtual desktops. It was like $79 to $100 a desktop per user. Why that matters is that what I learned firsthand was that on VMware especially, you need a lot of high IOPS storage to feed Windows running on desktops with lots of users. So we ended up having to use some really expensive enterprise-grade NAS equipment in order to get the IOPS, and we also learned the hard way that storage snapshots come in handy from time to time when things don't go as they're supposed to. Who in here has ever had to restore a VM from a storage snapshot? It's really good to have the snapshots when the chips are down, right? So anyway, we ended up, I think we had a NetApp FAS 3270, which always seemed like a funny name to me. But anyway, it was a really beefy machine, but it was very expensive. It was like a $750,000 machine for like 54 terabytes. So what we ultimately figured out was that when you're getting SaaS revenue in and you're having to invest up front and you're trying to use this really high-end equipment, you can't make money. Okay, it's awfully capital intensive too. So there was this mismatch between the way we got our revenue as a subscription-based company and the investments that were having to be made. So when the investors figured out that the more we sold, the more money they were going to lose, they were late for the door. And the thing kind of shut down. That was a very painful experience. But I learned something important, which is storage is not just a bunch of disks sitting out on the network, which is how I viewed it previously. It's like the core foundational aspect of everything that we do in VMware and really in IT. So what I realized is there's an opportunity to go create these enterprise grade capabilities that you found in the EMCs, the NetApps, and the other NAS equipment, but do it in a way that was subscription based so the costs scaled with your revenue. Okay, so I set off to go do that and ended up building SoftNAS. We ended up on AWS early on in 2013 before the cloud had really taken off, mainstream like it is today. And so we were early, which was a good thing for us in a sense. And so over the period of time, we've been able to build a pretty nice business. We've got hundreds of major customers in probably 36 countries now across the world, thousands of DevOps users, many hundreds of enterprise 365 type users. Running their mission critical applications in the cloud on SoftNAS. And so we've been able to achieve more than what I was really originally setting out to do, but along the way, we learned that there are other problems that customers are having besides just the data storage pieces with the cloud. And so that's what led us to, I would say in late 2014, 2015, to expand the original mission beyond just Cloud NAS to something new. So today we're focused on, and this year we've introduced product set around how to connect your business with the cloud, because we think that's a bigger objective than just the data piece with the Cloud NAS. So our mission that we set forth to go achieve back in late 2014 was to become the fabric for business data in the cloud. And when we set that out, to be honest, we didn't really have a clue how we were going to get there. It was just one of those BHAG things you set out there, seems like the right direction. And the reason was that we could see that data was no longer centered in the data center where you could control it. It was leaking out all over the place. It's moving out to SaaS applications all over the place where you could get to it with web services. It was moving across multiple data centers globally as globalization took hold. It was moving to multiple cloud providers, not just public, but also private. So the data was all over the place and increasingly dispersed. And we figured, well, customers are going to have problems moving this data around, managing it, controlling it, since it's no longer in the data center. At the same time, there's data it needs to be at the edge in the remote office, the factory branch office. And this was pre-IoT. So now, of course, machine-generated data over the next few years is going to eclipse all data that's ever been generated. So the sheer amount of data that is coming at customers was clear to us was going to be a big problem. So what we created is the SoftNAS Cloud Data Platform, Cloud Data Platform. And that's what we're really going to talk about, is how we're approaching solving this bigger problem that was originally just sort of a wish, of where to go, but has turned into something we're actually starting to deliver on. So I like to talk about the customer problems that we were hearing about that sort of led us down this direction. So on the left, we see what I like to call the archaeological dig of IT. Everybody's dig's a little different, but you've got these layers of technology that are the byproduct of decades of incrementalism, okay? And so, for example, we've got all these application stacks, everything from Java, .NET, MFC, C, C++, PHP, Python. You probably know the list. It's a long list, right? And customers have built these applications on the technologies. They bought the packaged apps. They've acquired companies and inherited stuff they didn't really want, probably, that they've had to integrate. So over time, you get what customers affectionately call their hairball architectures that they're living with. But that's how their businesses run, is through all of these things intertwined and connected together to enable their business process to be automated and run well. But what's happened over time is you've got data that's proliferated. The file servers are off, scattered around the world now. And customers would like to maybe move those into the cloud, but they're not sure exactly how they're going to get there. You've got slow data transfers over the WAN and the internet, okay, which is sort of the backbone for the cloud. The WAN's one of the weak links, as well as can be the internet globally. And you've got hard-coded data integrations between all these things where needed. And meanwhile, the amount of data, customers tell us, hey, we used to do weekly full backups. Now we do monthly full backups. And the wall of data is getting so big, so fast, we see the day coming, we can't even do a monthly full backup anymore. We're going to have to always be constantly backing the data up. So with all these data problems, it's not just about storing the data and retrieving it and making it highly performant and highly available. Lots of other issues as customers are wanting to move towards the cloud. So what we ultimately realized is, well, what's really needed is a pre-integrated set of capabilities and tools that give you a data layer. So you now have a data strategy. Rather than everything being another one-off that you add another set of layers to your archaeological dig, you actually have a data strategy for a change. The SoftNAS Cloud 4 is a dedicated data on-ramp to the cloud. So the goal is to enable customers to connect all these different applications and existing systems with the cloud services, and then make that journey from purely on-prem to some hybrid cloud, to possibly full cloud someday. But I think full-on cloud for everybody is a very long ways off, if ever, for many companies. There's just too many applications. The archaeological dig is too deep. And so the cloud becomes the next set of layers, as opposed to the thing that replaces everything, in my view. But it doesn't change the fact that there's a need, and there's a need for more flexibility of how we deal with all this. So we've identified 4 solutions pillars that we focus on. The first one's where we started, which is cloud enabling primary and secondary storage. Most of our customers, 60%, are probably some kind of SaaS or subscription-based business, and in the cloud for the reasons I talked about earlier. They're also struggling to migrate these workloads out of production into the cloud in a timely manner. The projects take too long, they cost overrun, lots of issues there. They also want to harness the cloud without having to put everything in the cloud, ideally. So how do you do that? The other area we've seen is data is also wanting to move more to the cloud from a backup perspective because you're running out of space on-prem and you just need off-site copies for lots of reasons. So we recently partnered with Veeam to solve some specific problems in that area. So in terms of just a quick overview of the cloud data platform, and then Adam will drill into it in more detail. So this wheel chart shows the cloud data platform in the middle with the key technologies that we've developed to address these problems I've been talking about. At the bottom, of course, is the enterprise cloud NAS. On the right is something called Flex Files, which gives you flexible global file replication for moving data around anywhere to anywhere. And it's not just file data, even though it's called Flex Files. We started with file data. It's really any kind of data. We have a wizard-driven lift and shift capability, so you can point and click and migrate or copy sync data from anywhere to anywhere as well. We've also built on top of a technology called Apache NiFi. Who hasn't heard of NiFi? Anybody heard of NiFi? Huh? Spend a moment on NiFi. NiFi stands for Niagara Files. It's an Apache project. It sprung up at post 9/11 when the government and the intelligence agencies all realized they couldn't talk to each other. You had all these disparate systems that couldn't integrate. The government invested hundreds of millions of dollars via NSA, CIA, and the military to build this system that could integrate all these disparate systems. Well, ultimately, after hundreds of millions of dollars, and they had a fourth generation, it's Java-based infrastructure, they decided to open source the core. So we found out about this in late 2015, and when we saw it, we're like, that looks like the basis, the foundation for our cloud fabric, because it's got a nice drag and drop interface, and you can quickly drag and drop and configure all these data flows with virtually any kind of data and connect all these things together. The other piece is called ultra-fast. So the next problem is when you need to move bulk data from one part of the world to another over a WAN or especially the internet, you're going to encounter latency, congestion, packet loss. And as you probably know, the TCP/IP window algorithm doesn't respond well to any kind of packet loss. It keeps cutting your window in half and slowing everything down. So we built a technology called ultra-fast that is comparable but less mature than something like IBM Aspera, which is essentially a way to optimize traffic over the WAN. It's also integrated in here. So our goal is to expand beyond cloud NAS, which we're doing, to address a whole bunch of new use cases that you see here. Okay? And I'll answer some more questions, I guess, if you have them as we go. In terms of technologies, I talked about Flex Files, the Flex Files architect tool for dragging and dropping. The reason I think that's so significant is today, if you want to solve these problems, how do you do it? Well, you write a spec, you give it to your DevOps team, who's already busy, and you say, hey, we want to go solve this problem. Well, $500,000, $1 million, and 9 to 12 months later, you have a solution that you have to maintain. It's custom built, and that's fine, it works, but what if you could drag and drop and configure to solve some portion, if not all, of that problem? Be a lot faster, and you could do more things in terms of rewriting certain applications with your DevOps team instead of doing this data integration work with them. So that we're excited about that. Ultrafast I talked about, you'll see it coming up. Smart Tiers is a new technology for the cloud NAS. We developed object storage that is almost as fast as block storage, and we'll talk about how we did that with some technology we call ObjFast. So now we've taken this fast object storage with SSD and block storage, and we've created auto tiering so we can automatically give you the price performance blend that's needed through auto tiering. Now, auto tiering is not new. It's been done on-prem, and by the major vendors for a long time. However, it's new to the cloud. And it's new doing it, I think, with object storage. So that's something new for us that's just coming out. And I think I've covered these other areas already. So in terms of the architecture, so I've talked about on the upper left here, Flex Files and the wizards. We use NiFi templates, which are essentially prepackaged data flows that get orchestrated by the wizards. And we've got our own processor libraries that do a very efficient file replication and file manipulation. And then FlexFiles Architect, which is built at leveraging Apache NiFi, gives us the rest of that rich processor set for dozens of different data types, everything from Twitter to HTTP, HTTPS, web services, Hadoop, native Hadoop integration, Redshift, S3, Azure Blobs. The list keeps getting bigger. And Adam will go into more detail of that. But so those are the pieces there. Cloud NAS obviously is a key component, as is ultrafast. All this has REST APIs, so not only can you go in and configure it, you can also programmatically operate all this and build your own flows or whatever you want to do. We have a lot of customers. We've been doing this for, I guess, 5 years now in the cloud. I would say we probably have 12, I think, now of the global 2,000 on SoftNAS. We've got hundreds of other big customers and lots of SaaS customers for the reasons I talked about. But increasingly, we're seeing bigger enterprises moving much bigger data sets, much larger, more performance-hungry applications to the cloud.
Can you go over a couple of use cases of what you're doing for some of these companies? You don't need to out their name if you can.
Sure.
But.
Yeah. So in some cases, we're doing B2B applications where they've got a situation where they want to roll out an application globally to their suppliers, so supply chain. Other cases are using us for their internal home directories and for admin purposes or whatever. Other cases, we're a file system underneath media that's being transferred in from where they record the media out in the field, like we're doing here, and then they want to bring it in and then disperse it out to all the subscribers to the media. So just a broad spectrum of use cases. A few cases, the customer's gone all into the cloud. They've moved everything out of their data centers, closed them down, and everything's now in the cloud.
So what happens if it is in the cloud? Do you still do data management for that data in the cloud, or do you, leave it there as soon as it landed in the cloud?
Yeah, so customers are typically moving data into the cloud, and then they're leaving everything there operating, in the cloud with that, at least on an application by application basis. In a few cases, we have customers that have gone completely, everything's in the cloud, and they sold off their EMC gear and their VMware servers and whatever, right?
I also wanted to ask something about your acceleration of application you mentioned on one of the slides, and maybe it's going to be discussed later as well. Mm-hmm. But acceleration, how do you actually, it's just a movement of data from one data center to another.
Right.
Now you might transfer it quickly, but what I mean is that migration to the cloud, how does that get accelerated by just movement of data? Because application is much more than the data.
Mm-hmm. So Adam's going to go into more detail in his slides, but fundamentally there's two pieces. We make it easy to point and click and point at where your data is. Let's say that your data is on an existing Windows server or existing NAS or SAN, and you want to migrate it into the data. Well, the data is in production. It's changing because it's live, right? So first problem is you need to sync the data to the cloud, get a copy of it up there, and then you need to live update it. Okay, so we've got technology that handles that, so you can live migrate, and sort of wean yourself off of the old system onto the new one, or between clouds, or wherever you're moving from it to. Ultrafast, to I think your other question, I like to say it flattens the internet. What it does is it basically gets rid of the effects of latency and congestion and packet loss. So we intercept TCP/IP like with a SOX proxy to get down in the technical aspects, and then we encapsulate it and we use a reliable UDP, a blaster essentially, which is the way everybody's doing this now, to go end to end and do our own error recovery and to make sure we can fill the pipe and get the data through reliably and fast. TCP, when you get packet loss, will keep cutting that TCP window in half, and it just slows your download or upload down massively, and you can't really get past it. And I think we've grown accustomed to the great networks we have in the U.S. Around the rest of the world, not all the networks aren't always great, especially out in the remote locations where factories and some of the remote offices are located. The networks are pretty, difficult, challenging, right? Yes, sir.
Earlier, you mentioned that your technology works with multiple cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and you also mentioned that there's a tiering technology. Does your tiering technology allow you to choose between which vendor would give you the better price?
Well, no, so the tiering is really between block storage and object storage on a given cloud platform today. But yeah, then you have the ability to migrate, but between providers if that's what you're trying to accomplish. But what we're really trying to do is give you a layer of high performance block storage. Let's say instead of having, if you have 100 terabytes, instead of having all that be SSD, okay, which is expensive, you can have maybe 10 terabytes or 20 terabytes of SSD and the other 80 terabytes of object storage, right? And we automatically migrate the data in and out, so you get the best performance for the data that's active, and as it becomes inactive, it matriculates its way down the tiers to less expensive storage.
So you basically use a mix of EBS, EFS, and S3, totally made transparent. The tiering is totally made transparent.
Yeah.
You use kind of instances on AWS,
That's
and
right.
these instances can auto-tier the data
Exactly
flow
right.
across all the...
Yeah, I didn't really say that. We, I guess, took it for granted. But yeah, we're running as a virtual machine or an instance on AWS and Azure VMs, right? That's how we operate. Okay. Other questions on any other?
If you're talking about moving into the cloud, so there's basically two camps that say don't modernize your applications, but don't utilize the native services the clouds offer versus do that, right?
That's right.
So which of the two camps do you support or do you leverage?
We do whatever the customer wants. I mean, it's not up to us, right? So we're filling a gap today that is around the file storage aspect. Customers typically make their own decision about their app modernization and how they want to proceed with that. Personally, I believe that there's the cloud is disrupting traditional application architectures, and the goal of the cloud providers, the cloud to me is a new operating system with its own APIs. It's the new operating system, and it happens to run VM so it can run all the old stuff too, right? But the goal of the cloud vendors is to get you locked into their cloud platform using their proprietary APIs. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's a lot of great services. It makes it fast, much faster and easier to build those apps. So there's a lot of incentives to do it. But it takes a lot of energy and time and budget to go rewrite everything. So I think there's a blend. What we see customers doing is they may move wholesale into the cloud, and they may have one app that's a critical app they'll modernize or may develop from scratch. But then over time, some of them will kind of rewrite things. Instead of using a cloud NAS, they'll move it to native S3 and some other cloud services, right? So I think that's inevitable. There's going to be, but it's a slow, drawn-out process.
Yeah,
right?
and to prevent any, forced decisions, you're basically agnostic to whichever.
Yeah, cloud platform, however they want to. We don't get into the application architecture part of the business today.